I want to tell you an Anzac story. Now, I know Anzac Day was sometime about a week ago, and I missed the opportunity, but I wanted to tell this little story. So this is Roger from the MSC Mission Office, and you're with Mission Alive. When I was a student in seminary many years ago, we had a brother with us, and he joined us as an older man, had lived his life, um, and I got to know him quite a bit in that I used to help him sometimes in his work. He used to look after the dining room, and I used to help him out with many things there. And in conversation, he told me about his experience fighting in the Second World War in Papua New Guinea, specifically in Milne Bay, where many of our MSC men were at the time, or we were just trying to start the mission there. And later, after the war, many of our men went there, and our sisters served in Milne Bay, Eastern Papua. And part of what Nick, and his name was Nick, part of what Nick was telling me was how he hated the Japanese. He hated them, and he called them names that I can't repeat on this broadcast. And this was an abiding sort of thing with him. Whenever you brought up the war or anything to do with Japan, he would tell you how much he hated them. Now, my guess is that you can't send young men out with a gun in war to shoot other people unless you tell them first that these are bad people and they need to be shot. So this hatred was engendered. Anyway, the story I want to tell is years later, after his experience there, when he was with us in the seminary, it was Sacred Heart Feast Day. And the Japanese bishop from Nagoya was in Melbourne for a conference. Now, after the Second World War, we took up a mission in Japan and became centered on Nagoya. So this bishop was the bishop for our men in Japan. So the superior of the day at the monastery contacted this bishop and invited him to come out for the feast day, which he accepted, and he came out as a very gracious man, a very nice man. So he celebrated the Eucharist with us and joined us for the evening meal afterwards. At that meal, my friend, who hated the Japanese, found himself sitting across the table from this Japanese bishop. And in conversation, it was found they were both soldiers in the war, and they were both soldiers in Papua, and they were both soldiers in that Milne Bay campaign. And as they discussed, they worked out almost to the day and almost to the hour that they had been shooting at each other. As young men, they were in the battlefield shooting at each other. This was a great revelation, and in some ways a shock to our friend Nick. In the days after that feast day, he was very quiet. Wasn't saying much. He was usually quite talkative. So I said to him, Nick, you're very quiet. What's wrong? And he told me the story about he and this Japanese bishop and their conversation. And him realised that a Japanese soldier who he'd come to hate was a Catholic at the time and had become a priest and a bishop. And I remember quite clearly, after him telling me this story, he walked away with his head down, shaking his head, and he said, a man's got to come away with a different point of view. It took all those years for him to change his mind, to have, in effect, a conversion, a change in his life in regard to his relationship and his attitude towards the Japanese people. I always remember that very clearly. Then, of course, as I said, our men, MSCs, went to Japan. Some are still there and have been serving the people and the church there. And many of them had served under that same bishop. So this is Mission Alive. The mission is still alive. And I thank you for being with us and for sharing this mission with us.